Good morning. I can't help but get a little smile every time I tell people that I had my first drink of alcohol when I went to the Methodist Seminary up in Evanston. You see, back then the Methodists, claiming to follow the Jesus who supposedly could turn water into wine so everybody could party, somehow had concluded that drinking alcohol was a sin. Well, now you could dance. Well, I mean, being the shy, introverted son of a Methodist minister, we know that wasn't going to go anywhere. But not drinking, I could handle that. Partly because I had really good training. You see, on vacations, for example, when it was time to eat, we would be driving down the road. My father would pull up to a restaurant, leave us in the car, go in and see if they served alcohol. And if they did, we were on down the road. I can guarantee you that learning to hold your bladder in the back of a car when it's bouncing around is a lot harder than not learning how to drink. I know some of you can feel that car ride with me. But it wasn't just avoiding drinking. I didn't swear, got good grades, generally had good manners, was a good athlete. The other kids didn't tell me when they were going out drinking just to protect me. They voted me class president to give them good cover. So seemingly things were going along fine, but being president of the class meant you were expected to go to the junior prom. Oh boy, I got to ask a girl out. I'll tell you, that was so terrifying that even though I found another shy, introverted person pretending to be nearly perfect, that leftover trauma led me to just marrying her rather than go through that again. Other than that, it was a pretty easy path. Follow all the rules, meet all the expectations, don't think about or even talk about sex. And not only will you feel good about yourself, you'll be praised by all kinds of adults, get a scholarship to college, and be on the fast track to eternal life. Bada boom. I will say I experimented once with swearing in middle school. Now, if you're going to try out something new, you're going to try it out in a safe environment, right? With your mother. Well, I'll tell you, I've never been slapped so hard in my life. And we got that little deflection from perfection right in the back in the right direction in a really big hurry. But just to be sure, I made my way to seminary and got ordained as a Methodist minister. Now, it just so happened that we had a really good basketball team. And we could beat most of the fraternities at Northwestern in the intramural league. But you know what they did after the games? Oh boy. Life crisis number 2. I really wanted to pretend that I maybe could sort of fit in with normal people. So I actually learned to swallow beer. Yeah, I did. I could do it. And it only took me 5 years, really, before I figured out that I could be part of the story that goes into 3 guys walk into a bar, one of them orders a Coke. Well, equally profound to my learning to drink in seminary was that I learned a whole lot of other things that I hadn't previously been exposed to. About other world religions, some with one God, some not. Other cultures with creation and flood stories, some pretty similar to those in the Bible. I also learned that parts of the Bible are really boring as hell. And others contain outrageous stuff. I mean, like condoning human sacrifice and laying out the rules for selling your daughter into slavery. About the all-male church councils, which voted on competing books of what stories got into the Holy Bible and which ones got trashed. All pretty eye-opening stuff for someone who thought they'd been following the right path. But what I learned most in seminary was that for me, it was impossible with any intellectual integrity to live my entire life during the week based on a scientific understanding and knowledge of how the world functions, and pretend on Sunday and in my spiritual life that the world was actually created and run by some invisible spirit. There just wasn't anything in my scientific understanding of science that gave me any evidence to the idea that before the Big Bang, some super consciousness had thought, oh, I think I'll blow myself up, create a universe, wait a few billion years while a trillion solar systems evolve, give or take a few billion. Then I'm going to pick one solar system. In fact, I'm going to pick one planet, call it Earth, and after a few more billion years, I'm going to evolve some special animals. I'm going to call them humans, and because they're so interesting and so special, I'm going to pick them to love and make them the center of my whole universe project thingy. I really still wish that something like that could be true for me. I really miss that unfailing certainty that if I just act and believe right, I will not only now, but forever be embraced by some all-powerful being that loves me and watches out for me especially. But that just isn't compatible with how I actually live. I don't use ghosts or spirits or gods, either good ones or bad ones, to explain why my car won't start, why my plumbing backs up, why the Colts can't find a quarterback, why I can't ever win a game of anything against my son, why the wildflowers I planted actually attracted a butterfly, why I lost the hearing in my left ear, why my wife died. There may be unidentified forces at work in my life, but I don't think they're conscious or supernatural. I just couldn't use a totally different worldview to explain why I'm on this earth than the worldview with which I actually live on this earth. So the struggle for me personally was this poor guy who had spent his entire growing up trying to find his direction, and by believing what he'd been told, following all the rules, and really trying to be nearly perfect, was just another lost soul. So I found this quote from Werner and Lottie Peltz from their book called God Is No More that I found both challenging and helpful. And I recite it frequently for myself and with little provocation, so here you go. We are sinners, not because we do this or we leave that undone. We are sinners because we refuse to follow our hopes, trust our desires, and obey our visions, preferring to unlive our lives because living them involves too much risk. Well, I like it. We are sinners not because we do this or leave that undone, but because we refuse to follow our hopes, trust our desires, and obey our visions. Well, it turned out that the nearly perfect person that I had struggled so hard to become was the biggest damn sinner of all. So where should I start if you got to begin all over again? Any suggestions? No, not the marijuana. That was just another experiment after the beer. I will tell you I liked it way better in brownies, and I thought I was one of the funniest people on the planet, but my perception might have been off a little bit. No, that's not what I did. What I did was I divorced my nearly perfect wife. Now, that was the saddest and most lonely thing I've ever done in my life. She really was a good person. I had a wonderful family who loved me. None of them deserved to be hurt. But I chose to go against not only all the things I'd been taught, but also against my own budding intuitive moral principles, that I really did try to be kind and not hurt other people. But I did. And I did it with full awareness. So that decision and consequences have left scars with which I will forever live. But there's also no doubt in my mind that it was the most thoughtfully moral action I've ever taken. I could have stayed married and presumably lived in Lake Wobegon with 2.5 children who were of course, above average and normally good looking. But I would not have embraced and accepted the gift to explore what I might do with the precious gift of a life. Maybe you would have chosen differently, and I'm not encouraging divorce, but the point is not what we do or what we leave undone. It's embracing and honoring the human gift of life by deciding what we're going to do with it. Not being afraid to follow our hopes and trust our desires and to obey our visions. The highest moral acts are not which decisions we choose, but the willingness to make the choices. And by those choices, we create the threads that weave that one-of-a-kind fabric that we call our life. As I tried to explain to my poor mother, who could never again brag about her to her friends and family of her nearly perfect son, Mom, I know you think I'm going to drive my life right into a ditch, but this will be the first time I'm driving, and I can live with that. Well, now, you may not have experienced my challenges, but I'm sure that many of you have had other serious, challenging situations, some of them heart-wrenching. You may have had to decide whether to stay in a toxic, dead, or abusive relationship for financial security for yourself or for others. You may have had to decide whether to stop life support for a loved one whose life was not going to come back. You may have decided to cut off a beloved child or parent whose life choices and behavior will destroy your own being if you don't walk away. You may have had to decide whether to give up your own satisfying lifestyle to take care of the needs of a loved one. Deciding whether to come out. Deciding whether to get treatment for addiction or depression. Learning to follow religious and social rules is a good introductory course on morality and how to live. But the graduate course in morality and creating your own life comes when, if we choose course A, there'll be some good things happen, but there'll be some bad things happen. If we choose course B, there'll be some good things happen, and there'll be some bad things happen. And we are willing to decide and embrace our decisions and go forward with courage and faith in ourselves that we are basically good people doing the best we can. And that's a person we can love and honor and embrace. Well, so after the first 25 years or so of my life, other things happened. But for time's sake, and those of you who would only be interested because you're interested in your neighbor's vacation pictures and you just can't get enough of them. You know the ones I mean about, there's Uncle Fred's neighbor's pet tortoise's house. And if you turn it this way, you can actually see their name. All right. Well, it's Gloria, and she only eats radishes and mushrooms. So each of us has to find our own way, contemplating the meaning of the purposes of our life, but that's where it led me to the conclusion that the universe and our lives have no preordained purpose, and that can be pretty disorienting. The idea that I'm an unplanned, unneeded product of the evolutionary forces of creation on a tiny planet in a seemingly inconsequential solar system could be pretty depressing. And even though my ego finds it hard to believe, even humiliating, the unsettling truth seems to be that the universe somehow could have limped along if I had never been born. But here we are. The universe did its thing, and here we are. Even if it's selected us accidentally, we are the ones selected to say and create what the meaning of human life on earth is. By how we live our lives, by the choices we make, the places we put our energies. Not just small and inconsequential beings, but amazing developments of billions of years of evolution. With the text team's help, let's listen to what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say about this. I always love it when he agrees with me. If we can get that up there.
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe?
The most astounding fact
The most astounding fact.
is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds. that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So that when I look up at the night sky, and I know that, yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars. There's a level of connectivity. That's really what you want in life. You want to feel connected. You want to feel relevant. You want to feel like you're a participant in the goings-on of activities and events around you. That's precisely what we are, just by being alive.
I should write it down so I can read it, that Unitarians are actually allowed to get goosebumps at church. Oh yeah, principle number 9, it's coming. There are some caveats, of course. You're advised only to try it no more than twice a year. And you want to take the safety course first, like take a deep breath. We'll be fine. What if we're not just small, but also big? Perhaps the first amazing conscious minds of the evolutionary God of creation in this part of the universe. If that's right, life on Earth will no longer evolve by unplanned creative forces of nature, but now forever forward by the choices humans make. How about that for a purpose in living? Along the way, I ran into a lot of books. One of them was Paul Tillich's book called Courage to Be. Now, Tillich was a German Lutheran theologian, philosopher, existentialist. In other words, a potentially headache-inducing book that, fortunately, we'll just take the title from today, The Courage to Be. Not pretending that we earthlings are the center of creation or that struggle, pain, and our own mortality aren't part of the challenge of being human, but having the courage to look those challenges and limitations in the face and say, I am going to run my life as though it matters, whether the universe cares or not. For me personally, that means I'm going to invest in loving, caring, trying, because I've been given the opportunity to do so, to make a difference, and I embrace it. It turns out that the values I try to follow as a humanist are pretty much the same ones I followed as a Christian, just without the supernatural part and the part that I know I'm right. Instead of God challenging us to be good people, it's now up to us to see what good people can bring the God of unplanned creation to become. Practically, it doesn't matter whether others have the same religious and philosophical views as we do, whether we believe in one God, many gods, or no gods. We can ask and address the same questions together anyway. What kind of life do we want to purposefully now evolve on this earth? For example, we produce 50% more food than what's needed to feed everybody in the world. Why is it that some people are hungry today? Is that the best we humans in the conscious mind of God can do? In a country where on average we spend 3 times more on medical care than other countries, why is it people right here in our own community aren't going to the doctor today because they can't afford it? When we build what seem to me to be mile-high skyscrapers and resorts and vacation condos that are only used a few times a year, why are some people sleeping in tents and paper boxes today? And I don't mean just in Haiti. How can it be that 123 people have died of gun violence in our country this year. I certainly hope and pray that the conscious mind of God can do better than that. And one thing that may help us if we stop using this scarcity model that I kind of grew up with, that teaches individuals and families and countries to think the only way to win or to thrive is if you just beat everybody else. I really think human beings are smart enough to develop an economic system that encourages and rewards individual discovery and creativity and innovation and achievement, but at the same time shares those accomplishments so that everyone's quality of life is uplifted. As my favorite grandfather fantasy figure, Warren Buffett, says, we can deliver riches for many and a decent life to all, and we shouldn't settle for less. And it actually appears if we don't choose to move in that direction, we may be forced to redistribute resources and wealth differently as more and more people in the world, and we can't stop them, immigrate to other places where they might have a better life. As a starting example of how we might approach things differently, when a company gets permission to drill pipe oil in Alaska, every resident gets $2,000 a year of the collective state oil revenues. Some can get riches, and others can have a decent chance at a decent life for all. Looking ahead just a little bit further, when self-driving trucks crisscross our country, putting the truck drivers out of work, what part of those revenues should go to the trucking companies? What part should go to the developers of the artificial intelligence who steer the trucks? What part of those revenues should go to the unemployed drivers over whose lands we all built the roads for those trucks to travel? And just a little further into the future, when we can surgically remove gallbladders and do hundreds of other things with AI intelligence better than human beings, are we going to support the unemployed surgeons on all the writers and the accountants, even the poor psychologists? Believe me, AI can say, and how does that make you feel, in more languages than I can. Will it be the software developers who profit? Perhaps even the machines themselves, unless we decide to program them in a way that always favors human dignity. In a world where the God of all creation now can, for the first time, consciously evolve through our decision-making, wouldn't we want food and shelter and healthcare to be kind of basic human rights for everyone? In a deliberately evolved world, couldn't defense budgets be for protecting the planet from asteroids, protecting inhabitants from disease and natural disasters and climate change, as opposed to protecting us from each other? What if nuclear energy was reserved for the purpose of creating non-pollutive and inexpensive energy for the entire planet, instead of for the purpose of blowing each other up and making Earth uninhabitable? Closer to home, what if UUI mentored and trained our middle and high school students to help the elderly in our congregation so they could stay in their homes longer as they age? And then we gave those folks financial support for post-secondary training and experience based on their service. What if UUI not only becomes electrically power independent, but what if the UUI campus became the site of a hydrogen-powered microgrid that only had pure water as exhaust and allowed all the surrounding neighborhood to be part of a less vulnerable power grid? What if UUI raised $10 million, covering all the operating costs every year so our annual pledges could go to projects in the community service? What if we offered the OWL program, local public schools or private schools? I think the Jesuits could be interested. Or what about this? When we were planning the service today, we had a really much funnier video of Mr. Bean going to church, but we chose not to use it because part of it could be interpreted as implying a sex act, and we didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings or make them uncomfortable. But what if instead we had the courage to offer the OWL program to the grown-ups in our congregation And quit pretending that sexuality isn't sometimes a challenging and uncomfortable topic at every phase of life, not just for young people. What if we did what a few other churches and local municipalities have done by partnering with RIP medical debt, rest in peace medical debt, buying up wholesale medical debts for pennies on the dollar, and then paying them off so that individuals and families with a debt burden they can never pay are free in a society which thinks healthcare isn't a human right. What is the unplanned evolutionary force behind all creation capable of when humans put their mind to it? Shoot, we might even be the ones that get the clerk at the grocery store, you know, the one that has the magic override to the AI checkout machine that won't let you out. That person, we might even get them to smile. Or maybe even laugh. In closing, I want to leave you with a visual image. It comes from the cartoon and philosophy books of Brian Andreas, which you may be familiar. It goes like this. In my dream, the angel shrugged and said, if we fail this time, it will be a failure of imagination. And she placed the word gently in the palm of my hand. If we fail this time, it will be a failure of imagination. And she placed the world gently in the palms of our hands.